recording. So the Doug Pagitt Radio, we're chatting with Candi Dugas, and she has written a book called Who Told You That You Were Naked? And it raises some interesting questions about black women reclaiming spiritual and sexual goodness. And you were just talking there about the role of separating out the body from the rest of things that are important for human beings' spirituality. So, Victoria, go ahead.
Well, and even I was thinking, Candi, as you were speaking about this hierarchy with this dividing with this, elevating the spirit and mind over the body, not just in terms of sexuality, but even sensuality. I think there's a deep fear of sensuality in Christian communities, expressing just being physical and appreciating all the glories of physicality, whether that be through eating or massage or other kinds of
running,
athleticism. I think there's a real fear of enjoying the body and sensual experiences that is a part of this continuum that we're talking about of sexuality. Just the pleasure of being in a physical body. There seems to be a mistrust of that pleasure that is related to this.
Yes, I agree. I think part of the mistrust is because at least the theology that I've been exposed to in my life says that if you go too far, you're going to go too far.
Oh,
and
nice. Yeah.
It's a slippery slope.
Yes, exactly.
If you start to like yoga, then you might just start to like sex, and then it's all over.
Well, and if you like sex with one person, you might like sex with more than one person, and then here we go.
Yeah.
Yes, and so the whole health thing that you brought up when you mentioned eating and the lack of exercise and that kind of thing, to me is one of the tipping points where the mistrust of the body goes too far, and we begin to see people neglecting the care of their bodies, and like there are even women who won't do breast exams or vaginal exams, self exams, to know what these parts of my body are like normally, so they would recognize an abnormality and get it checked out and handled in time. And so it kind of angers me sometimes when we see the disconnect. You eat whatever you want, and you have an unhealthy body, or you do whatever you want to your body because you are trying to stay away from this potency, and it is potent. Our bodies are powerful, but it's not the power we should be afraid of or mistrust. It's how we choose to use them, when we choose to use them, and those kinds of decisions that we make.
Okay, now I like your thought on this. I'm not prone to conspiracy theories. I'm just not one of those people. But in religion, I kind of am, right? So I have this sense that like one of the reasons that theology gets created is because it plays a function in keeping someone somewhere in the position of authority, and either someone had thought that was a good idea or they didn't. And I'm trying to imagine beyond sort of the Greek influence, which I'm a big proponent of pointing out to people as well, and I'm so glad that you do that. It seems like we get beyond the sort of like, you're influenced by kind of Platonic Greek thought and that kind of dualistic nature of the body. That just seeps into Christianity, and, you kind of can't help that. It's kind of in the waters. But then it seems like, no, I think a kind of theology was created designed to keep women out of authority. And so women are turned into like these dangerous, potentially, and they're seductive, and there's a power that women have over men because, as a friend of mine says it, men don't have sex, women have sex, and men want it from them, right? Like they hold the power of sex.
Right.
And you can get this idea of Christianity. It's hard to find anywhere in Catholic or conservative Protestant Christianity that doesn't want to hold to the virgin birth. And the virgin birth narrative is really an anti-sex narrative, right? Because the virgin birth means that Jesus was born not of human activity, but of God activity, and now we've separated the two. And then Catholics will even hold to the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which means that Mary was conceived without sex, because that's the only way she could be pure enough. And so that sex in and of itself, in modern day Catholic theology and some Protestant theology, is primarily for procreation and not for pleasure. And that's why you have contraception theologies and all. So we see in our modern day gay marriage debate the idea of this view that sex is about procreating and not anything else. Is it possible that these conspiracies of keeping women down and out of places of power have run so deep in Christianity that it's not possible for a view like you want to advocate to actually take root within anything that looks and feels and sounds like Christianity? Like, has it been so polluted that there's just no remedying it within Christianity, and that the Christian culture could just never accept it?
I don't know if I would say that it's impossible within Christianity, but it may be impossible within a structure like a church or a denomination that is working to hold on to its institution, which is what an institution does. It works to maintain itself. And so beyond the Platonic influence is the influence of Constantine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That
So for people who didn't nerd out a little bit, in their church history class, like a couple of us did, remind people about the power of Constantine and Rome making Christianity the official religion of Rome, and thereby having to put additional restraints around Christian theology.
Exactly. So I give our founders of Christianity a break here. I mean, if I were being persecuted, I'd want some kind of relief from it. I mean, especially, that kind of persecution, I'd want some relief as well. And that's what Constantine provided by making it the official religion. And this is where my memory breaks up a little bit. I'm sure there was some benefit to him as well, although the stories we get are that he was converted and that's why he did that. But along with becoming the official religion of Rome, aside from the break that the Christians got from being persecuted with this strange religion, right? That this human God resurrected from the dead, and we remember him by eating his body and drinking his blood.
Total Walking Dead narrative there, isn't it?
Yeah. So things like women, the way we look at those of us, those that are feminists and womanists, look at Jesus as this great liberator of women. When we are forming governments or institutions and we need larger approval of them, some things get sacrificed. And I believe that the notion of the woman, what Jesus did to liberate women and to elevate women, I believe that got sacrificed in the creation of this institution. So you say, is it a conspiracy or did it just happen that way? It's probably a little of both from parts of some people in different generations. I don't know if anyone sat down and said, we're going to keep women down because we believe they are this, that, and the other. Probably, I would guess that some situations arose and some decisions were made, and then it just got perpetuated.
And it seems like, Candi, part of what you're saying in your book is that for Black women in particular, that this is felt even more powerfully. I mean, I identify with a lot of what you write, even though I'm not Black. As a woman, I identify, but it seems like because there's like two levels of marginalization for a Black woman, in that there's the issue of gender and race, that amplifies this kind, the potential for this kind of oppression through hierarchy.
Yes, because we have, and the reason why, just to go back a little bit and say the reason why it's the focus on the Black woman is because my research had to be focused. So,
There you go.
if we open it up to, it would be a huge
Because
research project.
it was part of your doctoral work.
Yeah,
so,
and
so they're
I
refining
will
all the
say
time. Yep.
for readers that don't let that subtitle keep you from thinking that you will benefit from this book, even though it says "Who told you that you were naked? Black women reclaiming sexual and spiritual goodness." That there's a lot here. I would argue for women and men of all sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So go
Yes.
ahead. You had to focus with your research.
Yes. So with Black women, meaning African American women, we are descendants of people who were enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that enslavement carried out first of all, it was because of our bodies, right? They needed
interesting.
cheap
Yeah.
labor to build this nation. And they looked at these darker bodies and this way of life in Africa that was different than theirs, meaning the slave traders, and determined that somehow these bodies were not full human beings, and we can use them as cheap labor. And so let's capture them and let's take them across the way, as y'all mentioned before, to this new promised land. And we have this manifest destiny, and we're going to build this nation. And so part of that, as we know, Black men and Black women were both sexually, I can't think of the word right now, but we were misused because, and our sexuality was a part of that. So we were bred. We were, not only were we property, but we were bred. And depending on the discretion of the plantation owner, there were marriages, sometimes there were not. Separation of the family was sometimes used as punishment. White male plantation owners at will, at their own discretion, decided to have sex with their female slaves, enslaved women. And so when we obtained our freedom from slavery, what Black women did, what my ancestors did to try and balance this hypersexualization of our bodies was to say, let's focus on our education, let's focus on our manners, on societal things, and also because whiteness was the only example of freedom that we really had by that time, after hundreds of years of slavery. That was our example of freedom. So obtain what white people have, act like them, be accepted by them, and we will rise, So sexuality was pushed down, was de-emphasized, and that has sort of led to this place that we're in, as we try to obtain equality and freedom in this country. And so that provides a particular struggle for full freedom for a Black woman because of her race and her gender.
Wow, that's really helpful and insightful to me. And you used a phrase of a kind of, I don't know if you said feminism, but womanism, and it seems to me that there's a bit of a change in a kind of feminist understanding that wants to include sexuality rather than to sort of downplay women's sexuality, because it feels to me, and I'm only 46, so I don't really know what was going on in the 60s and 70s as a kid, But what I hear back then, there was kind of a burn the bras, stop looking at people, don't even see gender, don't understand it, it's not important. There's kind of a sameness between the genders, and it kind of, there's a lot of people who would sort of argue that there was only one kind of feminism, and that was ignore any kind of feminist sexuality. And then there's others who, like you and others that I hear, that are saying, no, look, you can be a fully sexual person. In fact, that is the freedom that one should pursue. So am I remembering anything right here, that there's kind of a debate within womanism and feminism about the difference between what we do with sensuality and with sexuality?
Are you asking if womanism embraces sexuality more so than feminism does?
Well, or has there been a change in how a person thinks of themselves as a feminist? Because it feels like I hear new feminists saying things like, look, freedom comes from being freed and being more sexually and sensually engaged, and that's a good thing. So I have, women have a certain way of living and being and bodies, and that's all going to be a part of it, as opposed to dress in men's like business suits and sort of de-emphasize any difference between men and women.
Well, I'm a couple of years younger than you are, so I really don't know what was going on.
Well
back
played.
then,
Yeah.
Firsthand. So
how much younger are you? I'm 46. Are you a lot younger?
No.
It just makes me
2
feel
years.
old.
I'm
Okay,
44.
great. All right, yeah, great. Just makes me feel old every time. I didn't used to be the old guy. Really, it didn't used to be this way. Now, all the time.
I know, isn't it? It's a different way to be.
Yeah, I think that's why I liked being in Marco Island this last week. I'm like, I'm not the old guy here.
So my understanding of the difference between feminism and womanism is that when feminism came up, right, womanism tends to be a movement of women of color. And what I've heard in my understanding, again, is that women of color didn't find a full spectrum of address of their issues when they met with other feminists. And so, and Alice Walker is credited with coining the phrase womanism. And it embraces more of a theological bent, and it also embraces men, whereas feminism seemed to them to be, more of a fight against men. That's my understanding. Yeah. I don't claim to be a womanist, nor do I claim to be a feminist. But in this work that I've been doing over the last couple of years, and in my more particular attention to things like reproductive justice and everything that's been going on in our world, I probably will say I have more feminist leanings than I did before. Before, I sort of played down my gender as being anything that prohibited me from doing anything that I wanted.
I think it's been a challenge for a lot of feminists within the feminist movement to try to understand that a Western educated white woman's notion about how the way things ought to be doesn't necessarily translate to all women in all places at all time. And also a view of gender affects this perspective as well, where there's some feminists that are hardcore believers that gender is completely constructed and that it's only a product of socialization, where there's other feminists that would be called more essentialists, if you will, that say, no, there's something inherently different about being a woman, and that it's not just a constructed social position. And so even within feminism, we see these kind of schisms or camps. And then I appreciate your definition of womanism, because one of my concerns sometimes among some feminist friends is there doesn't always seem to be an appreciation or a holistic perspective of men, and that I'd like for all people, no matter, this is my thing, all people, no matter what their gender or sexual orientation or race or class is, to be able to be valued and live up a life that's full and free. And it seems like your definition of womanism leaves more room for that.
Yes. And again, I appreciate those that came before us who took ways to sort of play down things that they thought were a hindrance to their forward movement. So, if I'm going into an all-male environment and you cannot get past my breasts, then I'm going to cover them up so you can pay attention to what I'm saying. I mean, I get that. But that's not full freedom. Full freedom is being, if I enjoy my cleavage, then I shouldn't have to downplay it because you can't handle it.
And that's where the subtitle of your book, Black Women Reclaiming Sexual and Spiritual Goodness, you're really going after a freedom and justice thing, not just more, not an amount of sex. It's really, I mean, you even say in the preface to the book, it's really not even about sex per se. It's about
Correct.
Justice and freedom. It's about this
Absolutely.
other narrative that goes on. So I wanted to ask you, because Victoria and I were chatting about this before the show. There's this narrative that happens within certain cultures. The Amish will speak about this, some Muslim culture. people, some more traditionalist folks that will say, look, think of it like school uniforms, right? When everyone who goes to a private school or a public school that requires uniforms wears the uniforms, that's a great equalizer. So what we should do is have women have more freedom by covering up, and that women in Amish culture or in other cultures can have this great freedom because they're choosing to not play within the sexual energies of either the depraved nature that people like to say, or the evolutionary, drive nature. And so just skip all that, cover it all up, and make it a non-factor. And there's greater freedom. So, I have a friend who's a very progressive kind of guy, and he was in a predominantly Muslim country and said, man, we talk about women in this country, in this Muslim country, being like kept down by men. When I got home and saw women totally sexualized on billboards and in magazines, I'm like, I don't know which culture is more oppressive to women, the one where they're covered up or the one where their bodies are thrown out there looking like, 18-year-olds.
Yes. Lately I've been part of the local interfaith group here and visiting other houses of faith and such. And so I've heard that position from our Muslim sisters and brothers that, covering up gives them greater freedom. I can see that. And part of what I advocate is not to impose this view on others any more than I push against the more conservative views being imposed on this point of view. Nice. So I'm not trying to do that. But from what I see, if I see a man of a culture that believes that women should be covered up, in 90-degree weather, I'm in Atlanta, in 90-degree humid weather, this woman has on all this stuff, and I'm like, you've got to be hot. Oh my God. And the man has on this cool linen suit. Right. And so the equality doesn't, in my westernized mind, the equality doesn't happen for me there. The equality happens when I can be as uncovered as you, and we can both do what we need to do. And if I am just so attracted to you and I can control that or manage that, and you can too, then to me that's equality. If I have to go through extra lengths to help you control your urges, that doesn't fly with me as being equal.
Well, Candi, we sure appreciate you being on. People can obviously connect to you through your book, Who Told You That You Were Naked, and they can buy that on Amazon, and there's Kindle versions, even a lending library version of the book, and then you have your own website, candidugas.com. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
It is .com, and another one which is Sex and Spirit or Sex and Spirituality.
Sexandspirit.wordpress.com.
.wordpress. So if people can connect with you that way and what you're doing, are there other ways that folks can stay up with you? You're on Twitter and Facebook, I see.
Yes, CDLLC is my Twitter name, and I am on Facebook as Candi Dugas LLC. And then you can shoot me an email at cdugas@candidugas.com.
And do you have some exciting things up and coming that people should be...
Yes, locally in Atlanta, beginning next month, I will be hosting an author's corner at one of our Midtown West coffee shops, Urban Grind, where we bring together 2 or 3 artists that have books along the same themes and promoting that in that way. I'm also looking to be a part of the Crunk Feminist Collective's online chat. Sometime in February, they had an article called Single, Saved, and Sexin' a couple of years ago. And I will be part of a panel that will revisit that article.
Well, great. Well, thanks for making us part of your time. And I say this to a lot of people, and I especially want to stress it to you. I think you should have your own radio show or your own Ustream channel. I think you should get over to Spreaker and make one and get yourself out there every week. And I think you have a lot to say, and more that can be said than just in an interview format. So.
Thank you so much, Doug, for having me on, and Victoria, thank you as well.
It was a pleasure, Candi.
Thanks for being with us, Candi. We appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.